Welcome to day 3 of the Pathway to 17 Summit. The 20 for Good theme for the day looks to a world where 20% of all future jobs are put towards solving the world's greatest challenges. By 2030, 85% of jobs will be new, and half of all employees will need reskilling. 40% of current workers' core skills will change within the next 5 years alone. Our youth, who are the future of our workforce, are underprepared for this reality. By 2030, 375 million youth will join the African job market alone, pushing the workforce to over 1 billion people, the largest workforce in the world. While traditional trade and commerce will continue to adapt its workforce to this rapidly evolving future, we must ask, where will the innovations in workforce for sustainable development goals come from? And what could job-creating ecosystems in SDG net positive innovations look like? Today, we will unpack what transformative job creation tied to the Sustainable Development Goals may look like with our guests, Hassan from the Jobtech Alliance and Paul Breloff from Shortlist. Michelle and Paul, welcome. Would you give us a few words on the work of Jobtech Alliance and Shortlist, just as background? Michelle?
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Hassan. I work for the Jobtech Alliance and based in Nairobi. The Jobtech Alliance is an ecosystem initiative around inclusive job tech in Africa, launched in late 2021. It's a partnership between BFA and Merciful. We are interested as a Jobtech Alliance in digital platforms that connect people to work opportunity that build livelihoods. So when you think about things from gig matching platforms to e-commerce platforms and more. So the Jobtech Alliance helps the platforms to grow and create more jobs. We do this through 2 work streams. First, we seek to create an enabling environment which provides the conditions for entrepreneurs to build platforms that deliver quality works. This means things like building the knowledge base for the sector through research, community building, and spotlighting the sector. We are also trying to grow funding for the space through curating an investment network and guiding the conversation about sector financing and especially work on policy and infrastructure, which are critical for the sector. Secondly, we also offer and deliver bespoke acceleration services for our job tech platforms. Then they're able to have the entrepreneurs to build up greater scale, impact, and inclusivity in their solutions. So that's in a nutshell what job tech does.
Great, a real ecosystem approach. Yeah. Paul, what about you in Shortlist?
Yeah, and thanks for having us here, Gavin. So I'm Paul. I'm the CEO of Shortlist. Shortlist started in 2016. Both my co-founder and I were impact investors. We were giving companies money. We realized that as soon as we gave them money, their biggest problems quickly became people. So we set up Shortlist with the mission of trying to address and solve human capital challenges to drive impact and innovation across Africa. What that means 8 years later is we've got 2 basic service offerings and business lines. On one hand, we're an executive search firm supporting leadership hiring across the impact and innovation sectors in Africa. So we've worked with over 1,000 NGOs, startups, social enterprises, philanthropies, investors to fill senior positions, very hands-on approach. On the other hand, Shortlist Futures is a workforce innovation lab. We're focused on creating more opportunities for Africans to work and earn, both in the African economy, but also through, but also around the world through remote digital work and other opportunities. So on the future side, we run a variety of programs where we're either raising awareness for careers of the future, helping match people into jobs of the future, particularly where we think the jobs are going to come from. So we do a lot of work in green economy. We do a lot of work in global digital economy. And in some cases, we're also helping channel funding to the highest impact interventions in that space. And I know we'll talk more about some of those as we go.
Great. Thank you for that, both of you. Let's take a look at forecasting specifically green jobs and workforce needs. A question to you, Paul. Your recent report on forecasting green jobs in Africa highlights the potential for 3.3 million new green jobs in Africa by 2030. And you share strategies to meet workforce demands in green sectors like renewable energy and climate smart agriculture, and explain how these might scale to impact the broader green economy.
Yeah, but broadly speaking, one of the things we're obsessed with is where will people find work in the future? Unemployment's already relatively high, and we're facing workforce dynamics where there's 11 million people entering the workforce across Africa every year for 3 million jobs. So we're kind of obsessed with where will these jobs come from. We do think green economy is a huge opportunity for Africa and frankly for the world. Africa has this unique mix of natural resources, renewable energy potential, and workforce that could very much make it a center for green production, green manufacturing, green industry for the world and be part of the decarbonization story. So we have been working for about 6 years pipelining young people into career track jobs in the green economy. We raise awareness, we link to training, we assess, and then we help actually match and often support with stipend subsidies to get companies to take a chance on maybe unproven talent that they wouldn't otherwise engage. We've realized that we've been very reactive. We go to companies, we figure out what they need next week and help them. And we hadn't seen any data to really look at where will the jobs be coming from. We know that people have estimated that soon we'll be seeing $100 billion a year flowing into Africa's green economy, but where will the jobs actually come from? The work we did projected across Africa for 12 subsectors. What are the direct green jobs opportunities? As you mentioned, the numbers over 3 million, and I'll say that that's just the tip of the iceberg of green economic activity, because what this didn't include is a range of sectors that are on the rise that we didn't have the capacity to look at right now. It didn't include all the indirect jobs that are created, people serving the green industries in different ways. It didn't include people using some of the products like boda drivers or people using solar lanterns to keep shops open. It didn't include activity unlocked by carbon markets. So as you think about this, we see tens of millions, probably into the hundreds of millions of economic opportunities, livelihoods, and jobs being created over the next 20 to 30 years. We run a variety of programs, and we're looking at doing more that are creating more jobs in the space by supporting companies to drive more employment. We're looking at ways to improve the jobs that exist and improve the gender equity of those jobs, and help people hire faster by being more efficient with their outreach. But in general, I think we see that, you know, in the future, everything's going to be a climate job. Climate will become less and less a single sector and more a lens on which you view economic activity. And everything is poised to change. We kind of have to take a fresh look at almost everything to look at the sustainability, the carbon reduction. And I think we're very excited. This is really a generational opportunity, a generational imperative. I'm really excited to try to drive as many young Africans as possible into this challenge and into this cause to expand climate positive work on the continent.
I like that. So more than 20% of future jobs. Let's go for all future jobs are put towards solving the world's greatest challenges. A follow-up for you, Michelle. With Jobtech Alliance's job taxonomy and digital job services, how do you see job tech platforms aligning with green workforce needs in Africa, especially in emerging areas like solar energy and waste management? You're linking to this, where will the jobs come from? It's also, you know, how do we make the connections between job seekers and available jobs? And how do we actually create jobs through digital platforms?
So great. So similar to Paul, when we started Jobtech Alliance, we were like, let's go and find out what's interesting. But we realized like we need to figure out where the demand for jobs are coming from. So early in the year, we did what we call a demand piece, and we changed our whole investment thesis on thinking, where will the jobs come from? So we had about 10 sectors with potential opportunities or the new jobs for African market in the next 10 years. And green jobs was one of it. And so luckily, at least we came up with a realization same time that Shortlist report was coming out. So when we started doing our green job scan, we leveraged a lot on the report and looked at, again, with this clear guidance of where does job tech platforms follow and be able to support it. Because as mentioned, it's quite broad as a whole sector, but where is the potential opportunity for us to be able to do that? We saw 5 key sectors where we can play a role in, things like energy and power, where we've seen gig matching platforms like one of our portfolio company called Installer, helping installation people to be able to connect and get jobs. We're seeing things like agent networks being kind of critical. In the agriculture sector, looking at agriculture labor platforms. So being able to say like, I need a worker in my farm. Can I use a job tech platform to be able to get that worker? Or even like as a farmer, looking at potential opportunity of leasing out my equipment for hire and getting additional income for that. You've talked about waste and recycling. We've seen some companies in that sector, especially in Nigeria, looking at things like platforms that connect individuals in like sourcing, transporting, and sorting out waste. We actually have one platform in that sector called Scrapways that is doing amazing work in that sector. But also, we've seen a lot of ride-hailing platforms and delivery services like focusing on like vehicles and electric vehicles to be able to ensure. But in a smaller sector that we see it's starting to grow right now is kind of like in the climate careers. We've only seen quite a handful of platforms in that sector, but opportunity, I think as the sector continues to grow, we're seeing more and more being able to have that opportunity for having people connecting to higher skill level as a career. So we see that whole like kind of like those kind of 5 key sectors being able to showcase as potential opportunity.
That's great. You know, looking at each of those examples that you gave, energy and power, agri-labor platforms, leveraging agent networks, ride-hailing, etc., it reminds me, you know, of how China approached it at a whole of society ecosystem approach to understand that these jobs aren't created in isolation. They're actually created within ecosystems, within job creating ecosystems. And there's value chains that connect these ecosystems and make these ecosystems work. And so the jobs in any specific SDG vertical, whether green or otherwise, are incredibly diverse, right? And that just highlights how much of an opportunity there really is, especially in Africa, for us to leverage this massive labor market to take advantage of not only these innovations, to be entrepreneurial, to create businesses, and ultimately to create jobs. Paul, you more on the futures work, right? So how are you working to cultivate more opportunities for work and careers? Maybe some examples. I've been through your futures work. Some examples of the projects that you've worked on that are leading to more opportunities for work.
Yeah, and broadly green and otherwise, or mainly just green?
Green and otherwise, really,
Right.
as broad as.
Yeah, I think how we look at it is once we've identified where are the sectors to create jobs, we try to figure out what are the blockers to more people working and look at different things on both the supply side of talent, the demand for that talent, and then inefficiencies in matching. On the green side, on the demand side, one of the things we've been building and working on and piloting lately has been different mechanisms to help the absorptive capacity of small and growing businesses in the green economy to hire more people and to create better jobs. I think one of the things we saw in our research was this green transition will be driven by small and growing businesses. It won't be driven. There will absolutely be big investors, big multinationals, VC-funded startups, but a lot of this is very local. It's very small scale, and it's businesses that are going to, like in most healthy economies, employ 80 to 85% of people. So one of the things we're doing is looking at a model, calling it a Green Jobs Accelerator, to invest small amounts of money, 15, 20,000 US dollars, and non-financial support to increase how many people they can hire how they train, how they create on-the-job learning opportunities, how they promote more gender equity in their ranks, and trying to reach into hundreds and hundreds of small and growing businesses across the green economy. We also work with bigger companies to support with their hiring practices and things like that. On the supply side, on the talent side, we're also looking to just drive more excitement, awareness, motivation, and preparedness for people into this space. So we host something called the Africa Climate Careers Network. We have the continent's largest green job board. We're trying to raise awareness among young people of essentially helping them understand that even if you didn't care about the climate, this is where the future of jobs are going to be. And a lot of people aren't getting that input from their career services offices. So it's sharing people what are the pathways into the sector, why should you be interested, giving you the tools, the content to be ready, and then of course via the platform sharing more of what those jobs are. But we also work beyond green jobs. We're looking very much at activity in the global digital economy. Just one example is we run a loan fund to help finance equipment for remote digital workers. And one of the things we've started to see, particularly since COVID, is people are getting job offers to come join and kind of sit anywhere and do work remotely, but you have to bring your own device. You have to bring your own laptop, power backup, internet connection. So when people are getting these job offers, they come to us and we supply them with the appropriately spec'd laptop, power backup, Starlink if they need it, and then they pay back over 6 to 9 months in an interest-free loan. And we sort of have growing that program. We've done over 1,500 loans in Kenya over the last year or so. So I think that gives an example. There's just a number of places where if you can be creative about spotting what the barrier is, some mix of money, business model, non-financial support of various ways. We focus a lot on the human capital support, hiring, access to the right expert at the right time, et cetera, et cetera. That's where we're really focused to drive more opportunities and make sure people are getting access to them.
That leads me that leads us well into my next question, which is around cross-sector partnerships and inclusive workforce development, Paul. And I think that you've given us quite a lot on that already. I'm wondering, a question for you both, right? What role can partnerships across governments, the private sector, and educational institutions play in driving an inclusive green workforce, or other workforce, right? Any other SDG? Michelle, perhaps you could start by explaining how digital platforms can make green more inclusive. And then Paul, I wonder if you could follow with maybe even just one or two partnerships that Shortlist has seen or other platforms that have been successful in this space, whether public-private partnership or any other partnerships in the space. So Michelle, how can digital platforms make these jobs more inclusive?
I think one of the key criteria is skilling. And we talked about a lot of types of like partnerships, not just only on the platform level, but also when you think about government institutions, how we're starting to make sure that there's a right skill. We know these jobs are coming. We've seen the numbers that we've been given, but are we able to have the right skill set to be able to absorb the people in the economy? So what we've seen platforms end up doing in some of the cases is once people arrive on the platform is probably they don't have the right skill set. So the platforms themselves have to upskill and most of the time using like tech and touch model to be able to say, what are the potential opportunities here and how can you be able to grow? So we're seeing that kind of like as a key thing in terms of looking at partnership. One of the key questions we have, like, should it be the responsibility of the platform or should it be actually an ecosystem thing where if we're able to kind of create the right skill set across board, then it is easier for platforms to be able to onboard and ensuring that like we actually have the skill sets for the future. I guess also like the research is also really critical in understanding what's happening and what the needs are. And when you think about it as a whole ecosystem thing, it's like, how do you ensure that there is enough skill set, but also like enough tools? And I really like when, like, for example, Shortlist is doing with the access to capital and access to devices, right? It's, as we continue to think about digital platforms, you need to think about all those. Do you have a smartphone? Do you have a laptop as you get into the green economy? But where do you actually able to get it? Is it a program of like banking sector to be able to support by giving at least access to loans so that they're able to access these kind of devices? So it's kind of a lot of things like platforms have to figure out, and in the process, then like I think partnership is the right model to be able to support in all those things.
Paul, any examples of
What I'd say, almost kind of in response, I agree with everything Michelle said. I mean, look, there's two opportunities and challenges we're talking about. There's the opportunity to take all this talent and energy and have it working for the good of the world and addressing some of these biggest challenges. There's also this imperative to try to make sure we don't have a generation of folks without things to do that are productive, that are income generating. So creating jobs. I think as we look at this is a situation that requires all hands on deck, and so it really is something that needs public, private, everyone. Our programs really started to take off, to be perfectly honest, when we started to think more creatively about how to bring public funding into them. We started as more of a straight up recruiting shop, helping a variety of high impact startups and social enterprises, a lot in the clean energy sector, hire. And, you know, they could pay something, but it was rarely allowing us to run the kind of inclusive, focused programs that are generating people into jobs and having the impact we wanted. I think when we started to realize that really what we're taught when we put someone into a job, yeah, we're helping out a company, but you're also creating a kind of positive social good or a positive ripple into the market, because this person is another person employed. It is another person who's now building critical skills on the job. And I think on the job experience is often the missing piece. Tons of people have college educations, have been through training programs, but often without the opportunity to actually practice those skills and absorb soft skills on the job, you're still not very employable. And so each time a company brings someone on, sure, the company's serving their purpose, but they're also serving a social purpose of getting another person trained, productive, working on these issues. And so a lot of our programs blend some degree of employer contribution, but some degree of public subsidy. I'll give you one example, our program, Energy Access Talent Initiative, where we've worked with over 100 clean energy early stage companies on the continent, placed over 6,000 young people into career track jobs. There is an employer contribution. Employers are paying the vast majority of the wages, but we're supporting to make it a lot easier for them to find these people, evaluate these people, and support a bit with some of the friction of getting them into the company and productive to the level the company wants. And so this kind of combination of public money with private capital and the fact that you really often you can't really create a job without the private sector, because it is usually the private sector that's creating other than government employees, you really do need both folks in there. But I think part of the art and science of what we do is figuring out the optimal way to blend, trying to take the limited public money and charitable money that's out there and extend and make it go as far as possible towards this mission of more jobs, better jobs, more inclusive labor market.
Right. But sectors, if we think about inclusivity, right? Inclusive, a broad meaning. Sectors like renewable energy, agriculture, and waste management are projected to be major job creators in Africa. Yet these fields have traditionally seen lower participation from women, right? And so, Michelle, how can job tech platforms play a role in ensuring women are equally represented in emerging job opportunities? Are there specific strategies or partnerships that could help make job training and placement more inclusive for women?
So that's an interesting question. I agree with you, like that sector already has fewer women. But one of the things I like about job tech platforms is it's like, for example, you think about like a gig matching platform. You
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily not know who's the other side, but like it actually gives a balance or an equal platform for both men and women to be able actually to participate. But then it means then you need to have more women to be able actually to get it. So one key example I can say is like, and some of the things we've done as a Jobtech Alliance, working with the Jobtech platforms, was ensuring like they understood like where does the woman play a role, but also like how do you create awareness in terms of like being able to look at sex aggregated data, how many women are. Because one of the things we did realize was a lot of platforms just think about the business, but not necessarily the inclusive angle. So how do you start creating that awareness to be able to ensure that they're able to see opportunities? And then the second level is like, what's the business case for involving a woman as part of your business? So we've been trying to kind of do that as strategies of being intentional on creating gender strategies for Jobtech platforms so that they're able to see potential for women, especially in sectors such as this where there are very limited or a few women already. How do you start making sure that there's opportunity for them to be able to play on the same playing ground?
Paul, anything to add on?
Yeah, and I think the gender equity has been a big focus, particularly within our green talent programs. I mean, one of the things we wrote a report, Bottlenecks and Breakthroughs, which was trying to better understand like what are the actual causes so we can figure out how to address this. And we broke out causes along pipeline. Are there women graduating from programs in the same amount of ways coming into the sector? Hiring, bias, different ways to be more inclusive with hiring, interviewing, job descriptions, et cetera. And then, of course, workplace, which is a very significant issue, different things that show up on the workplace that maybe are less female friendly, et cetera. And I kind of underneath and across all this that was really significant as we dug into this is social norms. There are certain jobs that while physically women would be just as able to do, there's some very entrenched notions from both the talent side and the HR side and the hiring manager side of like things that are men's jobs versus women's jobs, particularly in more rural sectors, jobs that require spending a lot of time on two-wheelers, jobs that require spending a lot of time on rooftops in cultures where most women are wearing dresses or skirts or things like that. So there was a lot of things that we've looked at around where are the causes coming from. We've tried to look at it particularly in the hiring process, like what can we do to make this process more inclusive. I'll give you just a couple of quick, easy and actionable examples that we were surprised to see significant lift from, but job descriptions. Women generally look at all of the requirements of a job description very directly. And if they don't meet them all, they very conscientiously pull themselves out. Whereas guys don't seem to have imposter syndrome in the same way and often just click apply anyway. And so we've been working with companies, only put the requirements that are really requirements. Don't just put a lot of nice to haves and wish lists because you're actually probably going to, in the aggregate, exclude more women than men from the application process. Another very simple thing that we were surprised worked was putting at the bottom of job descriptions, women are encouraged to apply, exclamation point. Like, of course, women were encouraged to apply anyway. They're 50% of the labor force, but something about putting that in communicated a level of inclusivity that actually meaningfully ticked up the number of women applicants. I think one other topic that we're particularly interested in the clean energy sector is what we see as a big fall off from entry level to managerial positions for women. In general, the numbers have been moving a bit, but 35% of the labor force is women, which is not good enough, obviously. But when you go up to the management level, it actually drops to 15%. And so there's something happening from that level of, and some of it's surely bias, but some of it is different things where women don't see women in those roles and just assume it's not something they're suited for. And so if you spend the time to try to like build mentorship programs, if you invest in role models and advertising that these women are succeeding in these roles, that can make a meaningful difference. So this is something that's really important for us to get right. We need, as I mentioned before, all hands on deck for this green transition. We cannot be excluding 50% of the workforce in this way. So yeah, it's something we care a lot about.
I can hear that. I can hear that. Okay, well, Thank you both. I'm going to try and sum up what we've heard, but also then give you, a minute each to reflect. We have 1,000 registrants at this summit. They are all, from the countries that we live in, right? They are all from Africa, low and middle income countries across Asia, etc. They are all mid-tier to senior professionals working at the intersection between typical industry and sustainable development goals, whether it's inclusive finance, anything like that. What is something that this audience can do? What is one thing that this audience can do, right, as an actionable engagement or call to action? Just one thing that anyone in this audience can actually do to move this cause forward. So have a think about that. I'm going to come back to you just before we go to Q&A, and let me try and sum up a little bit of what I've heard here. And one of the things we heard is that we have a 1 billion person workforce in Africa soon, right? 375 million youth, 11 million people coming into the market for 3 million jobs, Paul, right? Is what you said. We're asking ourselves, where will these jobs come from, right? And the answers that we're coming up with is, first of all, it's definitely an ecosystem approach. There's definitely a value chain of jobs, really, in each of these job creating ecosystems, and that these value chains need to take a whole of society approach, including partnerships, and with inclusivity built in. We need enablers such as not only finance, but we need enablers such as support, whether it's skilling, reskilling, connecting to digital platforms, etc. We need those enablers. And importantly, which I think is so true on our continent and others, is that these jobs are going to be driven by small and growing businesses with that inclusivity built in. So that's my summary. I hope I captured all of your innovative thoughts. Let's come to you, Michelle, and then Paul. What's the one call to action for the audience?
I think my one call to action is everyone actually has a role to play in this, talking about the ecosystem thing. So it can be anything from creating awareness, creating or having like research and learning, having access to funding, all those things. But definitely call to action is like find a place of where you can play a role. There is somewhere where you can do that.
Paul?
I think mine would be pay attention to people. I spent years as an impact investor. People love talking about money. They love talking about all the money that SMEs need, and they love talking about investing. And there's this mistaken belief that money, if you have money as an organization, as a small enterprise, then you just automatically have people. Labor and skill markets don't work that way. And in fact, many companies now are being held back, not by a lack of cash, but by a lack of the right expertise on the right topics at the right time in an affordable way. And that comes back to the topic of pay attention to people as we think about jobs, which is, I think, an issue on par with the climate crisis and some of the world's biggest issues. We have so many young people that need employment opportunities, and it's not that they need them. It's not a charity case. I mean, they have a lot to contribute, particularly as more and more of the world goes remote and more economic activity can be done from anywhere. So I think like pay attention to people when it comes to being mindful about jobs and job creation and unemployment dynamics, but pay attention to human capital as the driver of success, the rise and fall of companies that are going to drive a lot of the wealth creation, job creation, et cetera, for the continent.
Great. So pay attention to people, and everyone does have a role. I just want to thank you both for your insights and your time today. And with that, let's move to an audience Q&A. Great. Thanks, Michelle. Paul had to drop off. And we'll now, as I mentioned, go to some audience questions. We've got two already that I'd like to pose to you, Michelle. The first is, from Mulugeta Mbiali, and apologies if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. But the question is, how is innovation and job creation related? It is apparent that skills and unemployment is huge in Africa, while the future jobs demand skilled labor and are more tech intensive. Michelle?
Great. That is a really interesting question, and I see it as two parts, like how is innovation and job creation related, and then the skills issue. You've seen from what Paul has mentioned, there are only 3 million jobs that are available, and every year there are 11 million people coming into the sector. So there is need for innovation to be able to kind of like new ways of creating new jobs. I can give an example. When you think about Kenya and the M-Pesa revolution, right? M-Pesa was a innovation that came into financial services. But through that, now we have over 160 agents across Kenya who are mobile money agents. So that has created jobs. So I see it as not seeing it innovation as a part, but also like part of the whole, being able to innovate around one thing that can actually lead to massive jobs. And one of the things we encourage, like the people we work with, is encouraging them to think about skill. And scale in terms of how do you kind of be able to get new people into new jobs. The second question, it was about the skills gap. It is true. Are we really doing anything and preparing the continent for the future of work? Being kind of critical around it, that we have to, as a continent, be able to support many more skills. Universities ourselves, we're seeing them trying to connect with the private sector to understand what are the futures that we need to plan for. I know it's going to be harder like with AI and everything, but are we able to think about growth in perspective in terms of skill set? Unemployment, I agree, it's still hardest, and that's why we need to innovate around jobs. That's one of the reasons that make me wake up in the morning and come to work to do Jobtech Alliance, because if we don't do it, and we know a lot of it will be informal economy, how do you able to kind of create more jobs in this sector? Thanks. Back to you, Gavin.
I just want to add to Chris's question on AI and displacement, and also call everyone's attention to the networking session later today. In that networking session, we'll be playing some video materials about 20 for Good as a movement. And what 20 for Good is looking at is exactly that, Chris, is how can we think about the future of jobs differently? How do we think about humanity's role in a near future, which could be AI dominated and could lead to displacements? One of the things that we need to be, I suppose, mindful, or two things that we need to be mindful of on AI, is that Africa isn't at the stage yet where it has even base functioning digital public infrastructures continent-wide. We have a lot of digital innovations, but the base infrastructure to be able to handle AI from an African perspective isn't there, and that in itself is a job creating opportunity, right? For us to drive our youth towards these innovations, and our governments and private sector partners towards these innovations in a way that they are job creating. The second is that sometimes we think about job creation with a bit of too much of an African lens. Like if we think about in agriculture, which is a session this afternoon as well, or agri-tech, should we, as much as we should be focused on finding farmers or farm labor, we should also be focused on finding or redeploying farm labor to farm tech or agri-tech. So whether that's precision drone pilots or whether that's other roles, there are opportunities where we can, redeploy labor into modernization and modern roles, and there are opportunities for us as Africa to digitize and create roles. Michelle, you had
yes. Yeah, I think AI is a really interesting topic, and I know everyone's mind is on it right now. One of the things we keep saying is, in some sectors, it will probably completely wipe out the sector in terms of especially if it's automated and everything. When you think about digital work, some parts of it will probably be gone. But also there's an opportunity of like new jobs that come in. When we think about AI, at least from my end, is thinking about like when the internet came in, there are some parts that were able to revolutionize and become better, but there's some we still need a lot of help, as Gavin has mentioned, being able to, we're still in Africa, right? Internet access is still a challenge. Smartphone penetration, I've just had latest data from Kenya FinAccess that we launched in December. It's not yet more than 50%, it's like 40%. So there's still gaps we need to make before we're able to really innovate around it. But we're seeing platforms being able to do so much more and leveraging AI as well, right? So it's not all doom and gloom, but also like, how are you able to do that? Like, as you mentioned, being able, especially in the climate sector, being able to have early warning signs so that the farmers are able to plan better, get better products and support. So I think for me personally, is AI will come, but also there'll always be a human in that whole loop.
Yeah. Good. I think that's all we have time for today. Michelle, thank you so much. It's been great. Audience, thank you so much. It's been great. We do have several other sessions for you to engage with today. And in fact, on this digital transformation and even AI, there are some very interesting sessions tomorrow on digital public infrastructure, specifically from the African perspective. In the final panel there, Diana from DIAL, the Digital Impact Alliance, has a specific interest in AI and data exchange on the continent. And so do come and engage her in that session. Michelle, you've been great. We will connect again soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.